Hello, my name is Olly Thompson, and today I'm going to talk to you about Jurassic Lake in Argentina. In particular, I'm going to focus on two lodges, Estancia Laguna Verde and Lago Strobel Lodge. Jurassic Lake is in the Santa Cruz region, which is in which is in Patagonia. It has developed a really worldwide reputation as being the go-to place to catch huge rainbow trout. As well as the lake, there's an abundance of other smaller lakes and the very famous Barrancoso River. While we consider a 5-6 pound trout an amazing fish in most fisheries, at Jurassic Lake, otherwise known as Lago Strobel, that's a small fish. And here, the focus is really on trying to catch fish that are double figures and up, and often some of these rainbows will be upwards of 20 pounds. It's one of the very unique places where you can target these enormous trout that have grown huge because of the diet that they eat, which is primarily shrimps and scuds, and because of the stable water temperatures and the highly oxygenated alkaline water that they live in. Traveling to Estancia Laguna Verde and Lago Strobel Lodge does, of course, require some effort, but thankfully you can fly direct to Buenos Aires from London Heathrow with British Airways. Alternatively, you can fly via Schiphol, Madrid, Charles de Gaulle, and Paris. So there's quite a few options. I would always advise, before traveling further south to Jurassic Lake, to have a night in Buenos Aires. This is partially because the domestic aerolíneas flights can change their schedule quite often, and you don't want your internal flight to be impacted by a late international flight. Buenos Aires is, of course, as I've said in other videos, a fantastic place to stay. It's a great city. You can have some of the best steak you will eat anywhere in the world. So it's well worth a visit in its own right. So you have your night in Buenos Aires, and then from the domestic Aeroparque airport, which is only a 20-minute transfer from most of the hotels, you fly down to El Calafate with Aerolíneas. This takes just over 3 hours, normally about 3 hours, 20 minutes. And when you're in El Calafate, generally most clients will spend that night in El Calafate before transferring to the lodge the following day. Part of the reason for this is because that first day you arrive, you can fish the afternoon session to get warmed up, and you can fish some of the smaller lakes that are close to some of the lodges, close to Lago Strobel Lodge and Estancia Laguna Verde. This isn't possible if you arrive on the same day. So you spend your night in El Calafate, relax a little, and then the following day you transfer to the lodge. It is quite a long transfer that takes roughly 5 hours. Although it's not a huge distance, some of the road is quite bumpy. You drive along tarmac, and then what feels like in no time, you're soon on a fairly rough track in a 4x4, bouncing around for a couple of hours to get to the lodge. Impressively, though, you do have the mountains just outside of El Calafate called the Cerro Torre, called the Fitzroy Massive. Cerro Torre is part of that. And it's an extraordinary backset as you drive to one of, in fact, probably the greatest rainbow trout fishery in the world. As I've said, the size and number of the fish is really what makes Jurassic Lake such a unique destination. It is windy, that's undeniable, but for really big rainbow trout, there's really nowhere like it. So we'll start with Estancia Laguna Verde. Estancia Laguna Verde is on the southern part of the lake, and it's not far from the main spawning tributary, which is called the Barrancoso River. The lodge takes 12 rods at a time. It's very comfortable. It's been there quite a number of years. The food is fantastic. Great Argentine wine, great local food. The rooms are very comfortable. All of the rooms are en suite, which is super. And one of the main advantages really to Estancia Laguna Verde especially is the huge variety of water that you have access to there. At ELV, I'll continue calling it that just because it's a wee bit shorter, you've got over 30 kilometers of roads that give access to different parts of the lake. That's really important because the lake itself is almost like a moonscape. It's very rocky, big boulders, in certainly some of the areas. So having roads down to the shoreline is really important. They have access to well over 10 bays, as well as an extensive part of the shoreline. And the bays can be really important because when you do get particularly windy conditions, they always have a bay or two that can be accessed and fished from easily, even when the wind is especially poor and unfavorable. All of these bays, really, they provide the most amazing habitat for these huge trout. But that's not to say that you can't have fantastic fishing outside of the bays. Along with this extensive shoreline that ELV has access to, they also are able to fish 12 smaller lakes. Although it's unlikely you'll fish all of these and you might only fish one or two, knowing that you can fish them is a fantastic bonus. And the thing is, you will have your one guide between two rods, and if you want to fish one of those smaller lakes outside of just fishing Jurassic Lake itself, it's very easy to chat to your guide and say, actually, the afternoon we feel like doing something different. And although the fish might not be the same size as the main lake, it's really interesting, intimate fishing. And it certainly adds a bit of variety to fishing the main lake itself. Along with the main lake, both lodges have access to the Barrancoso River. And they don't have access to the mouth, but they have access to well over 10 miles of fishing on the main river. And especially early and late in the season, the fishing in the river can be phenomenal. Huge numbers of fish, really interesting fishing in pocket water, and a lot of it is sight fishing as well at the same time. The season for any of the lodges at Jurassic Lake runs from November through to April. Early and late in the season is when you tend to get the highest numbers of fish, and that's because the fish are coming into shallow water and they're also moving into the Barrancoso River to spawn. So anywhere leading close to the river the fishing can be incredibly prolific. Throughout the rest of the season, you can have amazing fishing, especially for chromers, as they call them. And these chrome fish are quite pelagic. Well, not pelagic because it's not salt water, but they do roam around the lake a lot more than some of the resident fish. And these fish are extraordinarily strong. And once hooking them, they can tear straight into your backing and provide really the most extraordinary fight. Lago Strobel Lodge is the smaller of the two. It takes 8 rods, and although accommodation is still very comfortable, it would be considered slightly more simple than ELV. And it's the fishing, they have access again to a wide variety of a shoreline. Lago Strobel is located on the north shore of the lake, so they've got access to a lot of the north shore, also access to the Barrancoso River, but they don't quite have the same access to all of the smaller lakes as well. And although comfortable, like I say, accommodation is slightly more simple, and this is also reflected in the price. So it's a really good value option that still offers you the opportunity to catch some of these enormous trout. Tackling the right tackle for this kind of fishing is essential. And this is not a fishery where you want to turn up with a 5-weight rod and expect to tame trout that can be well into the teens and more. The standard setup here is a 7-weight, 9 or 9.5 foot. Some people like to use an 8-weight rod. Personally, a 7-weight is what I prefer. And also, because of the wind, a switch rod can be a really useful addition, especially if the wind's on your back. You can roll cast very easily and cast quite a big distance. The fly lines that are most suited to this kind of fishing are lines with quite an aggressive taper. For some less experienced casters on a single-handed rod, things like a Rio Outbound is an excellent line. Otherwise, scientific anglers, MPX or Rio Gold Max, those are excellent lines. Most of the fishing is done with floating lines at both lodges on Jurassic Lake and in the Barrancoso River, but it can be worth also having a range of poly leaders in different densities to fish deeper if you need to. Usually this isn't the case, but it's well worth having a wallet full of poly leaders, really from slow sinking down to extra fast sinking, down to, I would say, 8 inches per second. Tippet, bring tapered leaders. Although often the guides don't use tapered leaders, it's worth having 9-foot tapered leaders in 0x, 1x, and 2x. The tippet, don't fish light. This is not a fishery where you want to be using 4 or 5x. We want to be using heavier stuff. For dry fly fishing, generally 10-12 pound copolymer is ideal, and for any nymph or wet fly fishing, fluorocarbon in 12, 15 and 18 or 20 pounds is perfect. Flies, although the main food species in the lake is various forms of shrimps and scuds, we don't use imitations of that quite so often. I think part of this is because of a huge abundance of this type of food source in the water. It's kind of difficult for the fish to see the wood for the trees. So a lot of the standard Nymphs are things like copper johns, prince nymphs, hare's ears. It's worth having a few, dare I say it, squirmy worms and San Juan worms. And streamers, things like leeches, not too large. We're looking at no more than about 3 inches and often shorter. Leeches in olive, purple, and black. It's worth having a few with a little weight also, in case you need to get deeper. Woolly buggers also can work well. With the dry flies, a lot of the time it's just a attractor dry rather than a close imitation. And for this, things like chubby Chernobyls can work well. Large elk hair caddises, parachute flies with rubber legs, all of those will work well. One extremely important thing to note with the flies is that having really good, strong hooks is essential. So a lot of your standard commercial patterns, you'll find the hooks are not strong enough to deal with these big fish. A lot of the flies I tie for Jurassic Lake, I actually use carp hooks because they are very strong and the wire is thicker. If you don't have flies, don't worry too much. Both lodges do have their own flies, and all of the guides carry plenty with them. It's worth noting that both ELV and Lago Strobel Lodge, the guide teams are extremely experienced. They're all Argentine guides. They've been fishing there donkey's years. They know the fishery and all of its intricacies extremely well. Generally, with both lodges, you stick with the same guide throughout your stay, which is never an issue because they're all fantastic. And like I say, they really do know their fishery extremely well. It's really one of those places I've been fortunate to have traveled there quite a lot myself, and it's honestly a place that I find is completely unique. I've been fortunate to have trout fished in quite a few places around the world, but I can safely say there's really nowhere quite like Jurassic Lake. As I've said at the very start of the video, the size of the fish is truly incredible, and you're fishing is fishing for these fish, often in shallow water, and often, especially when there's slightly less wind, those fish will patrol water 2 foot deep or less, and you can see them with their backs out of the water like sharks. I remember a fantastic session that we had there where we caught really quite a lot of fish. I'm not quite sure how many, myself and another chap called Julio. We caught a lot of fish, all on dries and never in water more than 2 foot deep. And quite a few of the fish we actually saw before casting to them. The real plus point for both of these lodges is just the variety of water that they have around the lake. While you have other lodges on the lake that have some excellent water, you don't get to see quite the range of water types and topographies that you do at either of these lodges. And that's what makes them such interesting fisheries. Like I say, the guide teams at both are really incredibly good, incredibly impressive and knowledgeable, and it's a huge plus point for both programs. It's also worth mentioning that Jurassic Lake can be a really good add-on if you are fishing, say, Rio Grande for the sea trout. It's not difficult to travel to either lodge, and you don't have to necessarily go there for a whole 6 days, 7 nights, like you might do with a lot of the sea trout fishing. There are direct flights from Ushuaia to El Calafate. Ushuaia is where a lot of the sea trout lodges are choosing to fly to for this coming season. So adding 3-4 days or possibly longer at Jurassic Lake to extend the trip before or after can make for a really amazing combination before returning back to Buenos Aires and then flying out. I think as a general kind of idea of what the fishing in Jurassic Lake is like, I think that probably about wraps it up. But if anyone has any questions, obviously please do drop any questions now. And if not, that's about it from me for fishing in Argentina and fishing at Estancia, Laguna Verde, and Lago Strobel Lodge. As I say, they are two completely unique lodges in a destination that is frankly mind-blowing compared to almost any other trout fishing I've done anywhere in the world. It's truly unique and special, and it's why so many people return year after year, because frankly, where else can you catch or have the opportunity to catch a 20-pound wild trout? Not many. Thank you. Please do like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Goodbye.